Okay, we have a special guest tonight, and I hope he comes in frame. He's being very cuddly right now. It's my kitty Luke. Oh my gosh. But okay, he's just gonna lay next to me. You might hear the purring. So tonight I'm just going to do. Gosh, I look a little tired because I am tired today. So let's see. So I'm gonna read a little bit here, and I'm a little bit sweaty. I just got back in. I probably should put some eye makeup on too. Sorry. Hi. Luke. I wish I could put the camera on Luke's face. He just gave me the most totally not impressed eye roll face ever. But all right. So I'm gonna read from page 104, The Shadow Guilt. So it had been my intention and my hope or my aspiration or whatever you call it that I was going to get to about 20 pages further than I am. However, we have pages we're just about to hit in the techniques and exercises for this second hub chapter. And I would much rather take the time making separate installments for each of those and really dedicating some time to them and not rushing through those. I'm looking forward to getting into the third hub, which is chapter 6. And I'm actually going to be personally transitioning into practicing third hub. As of June 1st. So I won't go into too much detail about what I'm doing, but it's about working on the modules and the materials for supporting people in doing the practices. So, yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to read about the guilt, the shadow. Oh my gosh. Oh my, there he is. He's a little bit in frame. Kenny, look at his little face. It's just like a little slice of heaven. I hear people outside. Okay. Hope he's just repositioning. Oh my gosh, he's such a little king. Okay, I'm going to get focused here. So I'm going to read this and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it because the concept of the shadows is addressed in the second chapter. And I'm gonna read this first. So let's jump in. So the shadow guilt. We're in the second hub. And if you remember, the shadow in the first hub was fear. And here we go. So if we say something that hurts someone, the pressure of the bad feeling can drive us to make an apology to relieve the internal tension. When guilt is tied to specific wrongdoings towards others, it's acute and moves us to corrective action. It's that nagging feeling that won't go away until we do the right thing to make good on what we've done wrong. If we do something that negatively affects someone, we tend to feel bad, and the discomfort eventually leads to a corrective action, or if unaddressed, perhaps becomes regret. When functioning in its acute capacity, guilt is a meaningful contributor to a homeostatic, self correcting inner ecosystem. If it leads to kind and corrective action, the system is functioning. As a dynamic equalizer, guilt naturally restores peace. But when it becomes a holding pattern of chronic guilt and shame, it becomes a punishing inner enforcer. Chronic guilt is the circuit breaker for satisfaction that interferes with attaining the achievement of satisfaction and pleasure, which often can lead to repetitive and compulsive behavior. When guilt is chronic, we may fixate on enjoyment and pleasure, but characterize them as indulgent or sinful, gluttony, lust, and sloth. When guilt is reflexive, as it often can be with a shrinking adaptation, achieving a satisfying response to enjoyment gets interrupted with feelings of unworthiness and stain. In this cruel moral universe, only a so-called perfect body can eat what it wants and be allowed to enjoy sex. We may even seek out people who reinforce these distorted, disturbed values because we tend to find comfort with the familiarity of belief systems formed during early programming. Yeah. Yeah, and so there's a lot in this, um yeah, there's a lot in this, and some of the, belief systems that I'm challenging here are belief systems associated with sin as moral correctness and not necessarily as, so it's like that pleasure and, like gluttony, like, and lust and even sloth. So it's like enjoyment and enjoyment of pleasure and enjoyment of restless sins. Um, and I think one of the things, and it might be in the manuscript a bit later, is even the notion of sin initially was like it meant missing a mark. It wasn't like a holistic, um, like notion of like failing that represented some type of act against divinity because like in this kind of like at least in this is I want to be really careful here because I don't want to negate anyone's belief systems truthfully, but what I want to challenge, so I guess it's not negating, but I want to introduce like kind of some thoughts about these punishing notions of aliveness and enjoyment and connection. This the shadow of guilt, like Catholic guilt, people, talk about having, which is, yeah, I mean, I think if you know it, um, is that enjoyment, like pleasure, cannot be fully achieved. And so the craving for the pleasure never gets satisfied. So it's kind of, so if you're cutting off the pleasure of enjoying a food, a rich food, or um, honestly anything that's like classically like pleasurable, um, then it's the craving is just it doesn't the craving just remains. So compulsions can be formed out of that. Because when we're talking about pacifiers, which are also on this page, we're talking about the ways that we soothe ourselves when we are not able to directly experience the five primary human comforts, which are receiving someone else's complete and concentrated attention, experiencing affection, being cherished and adored, feeling safe and supported, and being seen and listened to by someone who wants to understand you. So the thing about pleasure, like, so when we use pleasure as a pacifier, we really compound the compulsion when we also have guilt about I'll call it like the tool that we're using. So, and if anything, it's like kind of creating the perfect storm to accelerate like kind of behaviors that, in excess can lead to, you know, like longer term circumstances for ourselves that we're not as happy with, like maybe the way it feels in our body, being sick or like overspending or losing, whatever. So these two things, the pacifier and guilt together, are like a pretty potent combination for creating like a lot of misery. So, an exercise that I'm working on for a module that I'm working on is about identifying the pacifier, associating it with like what is the primary comfort that is associated, that triggers the need for that, and letting ourselves understand that we don't have the primary, so we give ourselves the pacifier, the secondary. And so what that means is when we give it to ourselves as an act of love, like the need for guilt is, I think that's definitely something to explore, especially in the context of guilt as a corrective action for wrongdoing. So, even when people talk about like being guilty about food, versus just, achieving a level of satisfaction or understanding that you like experienced enjoyment with something, versus, and even, or even just being like, it's like, like overindulged or whatever. That's kind of seen is like that's seen without the contamination of guilt, experienced without the contamination of guilt to the best of our ability. But really the central tenet with parinama is really getting on our own side about things and being able to have a very clear, curious, and in some ways surprisingly ecstatic like access to like our experience. And if we're feeling guilty or shameful, that really, it's like a really like a circuit breaker. And I think I just think the key thing with all of the shadows, this goes back to chapter 2, is that they represent qualities that in their acute form are are extraordinary as far as being corrective and extraordinarily humanizing, and like they like basically like kind of a thing about being able to let go a little bit, because the sense of of having done wrong is going to like actually create a corrective force in ourselves that leads us to like really need to kind of like right a wrongdoing. And so, yeah, so this is like a whole thing. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to wrap this up for tonight. And so, it's a really important one. And I wish we could talk about it. I think this is one of my hopes. I talk about this a lot, is that these are conversations. And, and honestly, conversations so much as that I really welcome a counter perspective to mine. I think it's important to understand that all truth contains paradox. So what that means is that within anything that's absolutely true in the condition, like, or feels absolutely true in like existing conditions, the conditions can change and the circumstances or the orientation and paradox can change, and that will change the very nature of like the the perspective, like the nature of what we're looking at. So anyhow, I really don't make these light, huh? So, okay, so the next reading is going to be chronic pain and suppressed emotions. This one is profoundly important for Second Hub, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it. This is something I've had my own incredible direct experience, worked with people on this, and it is absolutely one of the things about Second Hub, about emotions, about emotional literacy, emotional regulation, that is an absolute like mechanism of really dramatic transformation as far as being like a very concrete direct experience with how this actually functions in like the practical sense. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this. Thank you so much for coming along, and if you have anything that you would like to request, anything you'd like to see, any kind of, if you want anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. One of the things that's been happening lately is that people have been reaching out to me on social media. I don't know, for as long as possible. And, like, I actually don't even want to talk about time constraints on this. Is people have been asking me, saying, hey, this is what I'm dealing with right now. So whether it's like feeling really sad, grief, feeling like, even stuff that's to do with work. Today I had somebody ask me about work and like with something that they were dealing with as it related to their work. And so we did some, we kind of pulled some key part number principles as it relates to it. Also, so pulled some page numbers, the person who had the book, to read, and even just really re-emphasizing some of the key notions to really like reframe the situation, in addition to some techniques and exercises. So so I want to offer that. So if that's something, where you're feeling like, hey, this is something I'd like a little, like, maybe we figure, like just some thoughts on. It's like something that feels kind of blocked, or it's like looking for kind of like feeling like maybe there's an approach or perspective that would be helpful. I want to offer myself, and we'll see. So sending you lots of love. I love you, and I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy you're along for this. We are in this together, and I can't wait until next time. See you then. Bye.